Evil mom took away dad's parental rights, girl shocks, entire courtroom. When she shows. Here's the introduction to your YouTube story. The courtroom was dead silent. The kind of silence that made the air feel thick and heavy. All eyes were on the young girl standing in the center of the room, her small hands gripping a folded piece of paper. Her chest rose and fell with deep breaths. But her eyes, those eyes, were filled with a determination no one expected from someone her age. She was about to reveal something that would shake the entire courtroom to its core. Just minutes earlier, the judge had been prepared to sign off on a final decision, a decision that would strip her father of all parental rights. Her mother, sitting confidently in her chair, had a smug expression, as if she had already won. She had spent months painting him as an unfit father, twisting the truth, bending reality to suit her needs. To the outside world, she was a loving, caring mother, doing everything she could for her daughter. But the girl knew the truth, and now she was ready to tell it. Her father sat on the other side of the room, his face worn with exhaustion. He had fought hard, but every time he tried to defend himself, her mother's legal team shut him down. He wasn't a rich man, and he couldn't afford high-powered attorneys to battle her accusations. The system wasn't fair, and it seemed like no one was willing to listen to him. No one except his daughter. The girl had been warned not to speak up. Her mother had told her over and over again to stay quiet, to let the adults handle things. She was told what to say, how to act, but something inside her couldn't accept it. She knew what her father meant to her. She knew he wasn't the man her mother made him out to be, and she couldn't let this happen. Taking a deep breath, she looked at the judge and said, "I have something to say." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The attorneys exchanged glances. Even the judge looked taken aback. A child speaking up in a case like this, it was unheard of. The mother's face turned pale, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her eyes. "What is it, sweetheart?" the judge asked, his voice kind but cautious. The girl unfolded the paper in her hands. Her voice trembled at first, but then, as she began to read, it grew stronger. She spoke of nights spent waiting by the window, hoping to see her dad. She spoke of the lies she had been told, the things she had been forced to say. She spoke of how much she loved her father and how much he had done for her, despite everything working against him. Every word cut through the air like a knife. The mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers gripping the armrest. The father, who had been staring at the floor in defeat, slowly lifted his head. His eyes widened as he listened to his daughter's words. The entire courtroom was frozen, hanging on to every syllable that left her lips. This wasn't just a child's plea. This was a revelation, something no one had seen coming. And as she reached the last sentence of her letter, something happened that no one could have predicted. The entire courtroom gasped. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he processed the girl's words. The courtroom was frozen in stunned silence, the weight of her testimony pressing down on everyone. The mother's confident posture had crumbled. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the table in front of her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The father, who had spent months being dismissed and silenced, looked at his daughter in shock. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. This was the moment he had prayed for. The moment someone, anyone, would listen. But never in a million years did he expect his own daughter to be the one to break the silence. The mother's attorney quickly stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is highly unusual. A child's testimony." The judge held up a hand, cutting him off. "We'll hear her out." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. The girl took a shaky breath. gripping the paper tighter in her small hands. She had come too far to stop now. Her voice wavered, but did not break. "I love my mom," she said, her gaze flickering toward the woman sitting at the table. "But she hasn't told the truth." The mother's expression darkened. "Sweetheart, don't." The girl shook her head. "No, Mom. You always said telling the truth is the most important thing. So I'm telling the truth now." A murmur rippled through the room. The tension was thick, like the air before a storm. The father clenched his fists, as if bracing for another blow, but his daughter's next words shattered everything. "She told me to lie about my dad." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispered conversations. A few people in the back exchanged shocked glances. The mother's attorney immediately whispered something to her, but she looked too stunned to respond. The judge banged his gavel. "Order, order in the court!" The room slowly settled, though the energy remained electric. The girl continued, her voice growing stronger. "She told me to say he wasn't there for me, that he didn't care. But that's not true. He tried. He always tried. He would show up at school to see me, even when he wasn't allowed. He wrote me letters when I couldn't talk to him. He never stopped loving me." She turned toward her father, who was blinking rapidly, trying to hold back his emotions. "I don't want to lose him." The mother finally found her voice. "She's just confused," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "She doesn't understand what's happening." The girl turned to the judge. "I understand. Everything." Her voice was quiet, but firm. "I know my mom is scared of losing me, but my dad didn't do anything wrong." The judge exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. He glanced at the mother. "Mrs. Reynolds, do you have anything to say about this?" The mother hesitated, her face paling. She glanced at her lawyer, but he didn't look as confident as he had before. "Your Honor, she's a child. Children get confused." The girl's expression didn't waver. "I'm not confused." The courtroom was silent again. The judge's gaze flickered toward the father, who was still gripping the edge of the table, as if afraid this moment would be ripped away from him. "Mr. Reynolds, is there anything you'd like to say?" The father swallowed hard before speaking. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "I've been fighting for her since the beginning. I never wanted to take her away from her mother. I just wanted a chance to be in her life." His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. "She's my daughter, and I love her more than anything." The mother's lawyer cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, this is highly emotional, but we have legal grounds for our case. The mother has had primary custody, and she's provided a stable home. We believe the best interests of the child." The judge held up his hand again. "I've heard enough." His gaze swept across the room, landing on the mother. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need you to be honest with this court. Did you instruct your daughter to lie?" The mother's face twitched. I was trying to protect her." The judge's expression darkened. "That is not an answer." The mother's attorney sighed, leaning toward her. They exchanged hushed whispers, but it was clear the weight of the moment was crushing down on her. The father's attorney, who had been silent for most of the trial, finally spoke. "Your Honor, in light of this revelation, I request that the court reconsider the termination of Mr. Reynolds's parental rights." The judge was quiet for a long moment. The entire courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Then he leaned forward, his voice carrying an undeniable authority. "This changes everything." The mother's face turned pale. The father straightened, hope flickering in his tired eyes. The girl let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and just like that, the courtroom was no longer the place where she would lose her father forever. It was now the place where the truth had finally come to light. But the battle wasn't over yet. The room was tense, thick with the weight of everything that had just been revealed. The judge's words still echoed through the air. "This changes everything." The mother sat frozen, her carefully constructed case unraveling before her eyes. Her hands clenched into fists, her breathing shallow. For months she had controlled the narrative, made sure everyone saw her as the perfect, responsible parent. But now, in a matter of minutes, her daughter had shattered that illusion. The father sat up a little straighter, hope flickering in his tired eyes. He had spent so long fighting a battle he thought was impossible to win. But now, finally, someone was listening. More importantly, the one person who mattered most, his daughter, had spoken up for him. The judge looked between both parents, his expression unreadable. Then he turned his attention to the girl. "Thank you for telling the truth today. That was very brave." She gave a small nod, her fingers still gripping the paper she had read from, like a lifeline. The mother shifted in her seat, finally finding her voice. "Your Honor, I was only trying to do what was best for her. I didn't mean for things to go this far." Her voice cracked, and for a brief moment, she almost looked vulnerable. "I was scared of losing her." The judge studied her carefully. Fear does not justify deception, and it certainly doesn't justify instructing a child to lie in a courtroom. The mother's eyes darted to her attorney, but he looked defeated, flipping through papers, as if the answer might be buried somewhere in them. She swallowed hard, knowing the walls were closing in. The father took a deep breath. "I never wanted to take her away from you," he said, his voice softer now. "I just wanted to be in her life. I wanted her to know that no matter what, I would always be there for her." The mother blinked rapidly, her hands twisting in her lap. The judge exhaled, then sat up straighter. "Given the new testimony, I will be reconsidering custody arrangements. I cannot, in good conscience, uphold a ruling based on false claims." He turned to the mother. "Mrs. Reynolds, we will be reviewing your actions in this case, and there will be consequences for misleading the court." The mother paled, her lips parting slightly as if to argue, but she seemed to know there was nothing left to say. The judge's gaze then softened as he looked at the girl again. "You spoke up for what was right, even when it was difficult. That's not an easy thing to do. I hope you know how much that matters." She nodded, then turned toward her father, her eyes hopeful. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, one that spoke of relief, love, and the promise that no matter what happened next, she wouldn't have to face it alone. The decision was not finalized that day, but something more important had changed. The truth was out, and once the truth was known, it couldn't be ignored. As the courtroom emptied, the father knelt beside his daughter. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. "I just wanted you to stay." And for the first time in a long time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he finally could.